Now that we have our timestamps rendering correctly to the screen, we're going to go ahead and talk about a templating engine called Moustache.js. This is going to make it much easier to define some markup and render it multiple times. In our case, our messages are going to have the same set of elements in order to render it properly. We're going to have a header tag for the user's name. We're going to add the text into a paragraph, all that sort of stuff. Now, instead of doing that inside of index.js like we currently are, we're going to create some templates, some markup in index.html, and we're going to render those here, which means we're not going to need to manually create and manipulate these elements, which can be a huge burden. Now, in order to get started, before we actually create any templates or render them, we do need to download the library. We can get this by going to Google Chrome and Googling Moustache.js. And we're looking for the GitHub repository, which in this case happens to be the first link. You could also go to moustache.github.io and click the JavaScript link to get to the same location. Now, once you're here, we do want to grab a specific version of the library. We can go to the branch dropdown and switch from branches to tags. This is going to show us all of the versions that were released. The version I'm going to be using here is the most recent one, 2.2.1. I'm going to grab that. It's going to refresh the repository code down below, and we're looking for a file called moustache.js. This is the library file we're going to need to download and add into index.html. Right here, I can click raw to grab the raw JavaScript file, and I can go ahead and save it into the project by right-clicking and clicking Save As. I'm going to go into the project on the desktop, the public JS libs folder, and right here, we're going to add the file. Now, once you have the file in place, we can kick things off by importing it inside of index.html. Near the bottom, we currently have script tags for jQuery and moment. This one is going to look pretty similar. It's going to be a script tag. Then we'll add that source attribute so we can load in the new file, /js/libs. Finally, it's /moustache.js. Now, with this in place, we can go ahead and create a template and render it. This is going to give you a pretty good idea about exactly what Moustache can do. Then we'll go ahead and actually wire it up with our new message and new location message callbacks. To kick things off, over inside of index.html, we are going to make a new template by defining a script tag. Now, inside of the script tag, we're going to add our markup, but before we can do that, we have to provide a couple attributes on script. First up, this is going to be a reusable template, and we're going to need a way to access it, so we'll give it an ID. I'm going to call this one message template, and the other property we're going to define is something called the type. Now, the type lets your editor and the browser know what's stored inside of the script tag. We're going to set the type equal to, inside of quotes, text, /template. Now we can write some markup inside of here, and it's going to work as expected. To kick things off, let's just go ahead and make a really simple paragraph tag. We're going to make a p tag inside of the script tag, and we'll add some text inside of it. This is a template. And we're going to go ahead and close the paragraph tag, and that is it. This is where we're going to start. We have a message template script tag. We can go ahead and now render this over inside of index.js by commenting out all of the code inside of the new message listener. I'm going to comment out all of that code, and now we can implement the Moustache.js rendering method. First up, we have to grab that template. We can make a variable called template to do just this, and all we're going to do is select it with jQuery using the ID we just provided, message-template. Now we need to call the HTML method, which is going to return the markup inside of message template, which is the template code, our paragraph tag in this case. Once we have that, we can go ahead and actually call a method on Moustache, which was available to us because we added that script tag. Let's make a variable called HTML. This is the thing we're eventually going to add to the browser, and we're going to set it equal to a call to moustache.render. Now, moustache.render takes the template you want to render. In this case, we have access to that right here. We're going to go ahead and render it, and now we can spit it out in the browser by adding it to the messages ID just like we do below. We're going to select the element with an ID of messages, and we're going to call append, and we're going to append the template we just rendered, which we have access to inside of HTML. Now, with this in place, our server restarted, and we can actually play around with this by refreshing the browser. I'm going to give the browser a refresh, and what do we get? We get this is the template for our welcome message, and if I type anything else, we also get this is a template. Not super interesting, not super useful. What is cool though is that Moustache lets you inject values, which means we can set up places in our template where we expect a value to get passed in. For example, we have that text property. In order to reference a value, you can use the double curly braces syntax like this, and then you can go ahead and type the name like text. Now, in order to actually provide this value, we have to send in a second argument to the render method. Instead of just passing in the template, we're going to pass in the template and we're going to pass in an object. This object is going to have all the properties that you're going to be allowed to render. Now, we're currently expecting this text property, so we should probably go ahead and provide it. Right here, I'm going to set text equal to the value that comes back on message.text. Now we're rendering the template in a dynamic way. The template serves as the reusable structure, but the data, it's always going to change because it gets passed in when we call render. With this in place, we can go ahead and refresh Chrome. And right here, we see welcome to the chat app. And if I go ahead and type a message, that is going to show to the screen, which is fantastic. Now, the next step in the process is going to be to get all the data showing. We have a from property and a created at property too. We actually have access to that created at property via formatted time. We're going to go ahead and uncomment this formatted time line. This is the only one we're actually going to carry over to the new system. And I'm going to add it up top right here because we do still want to use formatted time when we render. Now, before we do anything else with the template, let's go ahead and simply pass in the values. We already passed the text value in. Next up, we can pass in from. It's accessible via message.from, and we can also pass in a timestamp. You can call that property whatever you like. I'm going to continue to call it created at, and I'm going to set it equal to the formatted time up above. Now, with this in place, all the data is indeed getting passed in. We just need to actually go ahead and use it. In index.html, we can use all of it, and we're also going to provide a custom structure. Just like we did when we set up the code above, we're going to be using some classes I've defined inside of the template for this project. We're going to start off with a list item using the li tag. From here, we're going to go ahead and add a class, and we're going to call this class message. And in here, we can add two divs. The first div is going to be the title area where we add the from and created at values. And the second div is going to be the body of the message. Let's add one right here. And we'll add a second one just below. Now for the first div, we are going to provide a class. The class will equal message __ title. This is where the message title information is going to go, and we're going to kick things off in here by providing an h4 tag, which is going to render a nice header to the screen. And all we're going to put inside of h4 is the from data, which we can do by using those double curly braces and putting from right here. The same exact thing holds true for span. That's going to happen down below. We'll add a span tag. And inside of the span tag, we're going to inject created at, adding our double curly braces and specifying the property name. Now we can go ahead and move on to the actual message body itself. That's going to happen down below inside of our second div, which we will be giving a class. The second div is going to have a class equal to message __ body. And for a basic message, a non-location based message, all we're going to do is add a paragraph tag. And we're going to render our text inside by providing it. Two curly braces followed by text. With this in place, we actually have a really great system for rendering our message template. The code, the markup, it's defined over here, which means that it's reusable. And inside of index.js, we just have a little bit of code to get everything wired up. This is a much more scalable solution. It's a lot easier than managing the elements like we did down below for new location message. I'm going to go ahead and save index.js, move into the browser, and give things a refresh. When we do, we can see we now have a nice set of styles for the message. This is some message. I'm going to send that off. We get the name, the timestamp, and the text all printing. It looks a heck of a lot better than it did earlier. Now our send location message is still going to look like trash. If I click send location, it's going to take a few seconds to get the job done, and here it is. It's unstyled because it is not using a template. What we're going to do is add a template for the new location message. We'll do some of it together, and some of it is going to be a challenge for you. Together, we're going to set up the markup for the template. Your job will be to render it and pass in the necessary values. Over inside of index.html, we can get started doing this by creating a second template. Now, the second template is going to be pretty similar to the first. We can actually go ahead and duplicate this template by copying and pasting it down below. All we need to do is change the ID from message template to location message template. Now, the title area is going to be the same. We're going to have our from property as well as created at. It's the body that's going to change. Instead of rendering a paragraph with the text, we're going to render a paragraph that has the link using an anchor tag. Now, to add that anchor tag, we're going to add the a tag just like this. Then inside of the href attribute, we're going to be injecting the value. This is going to be the URL that gets passed from server to client. We're going to add our equal signs, our curly braces, and the value we want to add here is URL. Next up, we are going to carry over that target property, setting it equal to blank underscore blank, which will open up the link in a new tab. And finally, we can go ahead and close the anchor tag, adding the text for the link inside. Good text for this link would be my current location, just like we have right now. Now, this is all we need to do for the template. Your part of the challenge is going to be to wire up all of this inside of index.js, which means down here inside of new location message, you want to do something pretty similar to what we have above. Instead of rendering everything with jQuery, you're going to render the template, passing in the necessary data, text, URL, and the formatted timestamp. Take a moment to knock this out. When you're done, I want you to go ahead and move into the browser, send some location messages, and make sure it looks like it should. Styled where the name is in bold, the timestamp is in light gray, and the link shows up down below. Once you're done and everything is working, you can go ahead and click play. All right, the first thing we're going to do is comment out the code we no longer need. That's everything but the variable formatted time. Next up, we're going to go ahead and grab the template from the HTML by making a variable called template, and we're going to use jQuery to select it by ID. Right inside of the quotes, we'll add our selector. We want to select by ID, so we'll add that £, location hyphen message hyphen template is the ID we provided, and now we want to go ahead and call HTML to get its inner HTML back. This is everything I have highlighted right here. Next up, we're going to go ahead and actually render the template by creating a variable called HTML to store the return value, and we're going to call mustache.render. This takes those two arguments, the template you want to render and the data you want to render into that template. Now, the data is optional, but we do indeed need to pass some data through, so we will be providing that as well. Template is our first argument, and the second one is going to be an object. I'm going to start by setting from equal to message.from, and we can do the same thing with the URL. URL equals message.url. For created at, we're going to use the formatted time variable instead. Created at gets set equal to formatted time, which is defined just above. Now that we have access to the HTML we need to render, we can use a jQuery selector to select the element with an ID of messages, and we're going to call append to add a new message. The new message we want to add is available via the HTML variable. Now that we have our function completely converted over, we can remove the old commented out code, save the file, and test things out over inside of Chrome. I'm going to give the page a refresh to load that latest code. I'll send a text message to make sure that still works, and now we can go ahead and send a location message. We should see in just a second the new data rendering, and it is indeed working as expected. We have the name, the timestamp, and the link. I can go ahead and click the link to make sure it is still working, and it is. The little marker shows up right here. With this in place, we now have a much better setup for creating these front-end templates. Instead of having to do the heavy lifting inside of index.js, we can do the template inside of index.html, simply passing the data in. It's a much more scalable solution. Now that we have this in place, we are done, and we can go ahead and commit our changes by shutting down the server and running git status. Here we have a new file as well as a couple modified ones. Git add dot is going to take care of all of that for us, and we can make our commit, git commit with the AM flag. Actually, we already added it, so we can just use the M flag, add Moustache.js for message templates. Excellent. I'm going to push this up to GitHub, and we can go ahead and take a quick moment to deploy to Heroku 2 using git push Heroku master. I'm going to push this up just to make sure all the templates are rendering properly on Heroku, just like they are locally. It should take just a second to deploy. Once it's up, we can open it up by either running Heroku open or grabbing that URL as we've done before. Here it's launching the app. It looks like everything did go as expected. I'm going to grab the app URL, move into Chrome, and open it up. And now we're viewing our application live inside of Heroku, and the message data is showing up as expected. The same thing should hold true for sending the location. The send location message should use the new setup. It is indeed working as expected, which is fantastic. That's it for this one. I will see you next time.